In order to get to your 80s and beyond with more energy, strength, and independence than most people, you need to do different things than most people do right now. Things that require some grit, determination, and perseverance. This is no surprise, right? But did you know that there's a physical location in your body that's largely responsible for the motivation to persevere and achieve exceptional outcomes? An area that you can deliberately train the same way you train your biceps. And that doing so makes the drive for excellence, the motivation to choose the hard now in favor of the better future, and to stick with it, more natural and automatic, just part of who you are. If you want motivation and grit to be an intrinsic part of your natural personality, you need to learn about your anterior mid-cingulate cortex. You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 251, the body part that can make you who you wish you were. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for forward-thinking women who know it's theoretically possible to get to the other side of menopause without developing the standard list of chronic diseases and limitations, but aren't totally clear about how exactly to tip the odds in their favor without a live-in staff of experts on retainer to optimize every aspect of her health. You can do it, and you don't have to be rich and famous to get there. Let's get started. Hello, my friend, and welcome to the podcast today. I hope that you have had a great week. I'm so happy that you're here today. How are you feeling about using hormone replacement therapy after having had a blood clot? Knowledge is power, and you deserve to not be dismissed or made to feel afraid. Most doctors won't even weigh the options with women who've had a blood clot in the past, and by so doing, they are harming women in the name of protecting them. Today, we're going to talk about what is probably the coolest part of your body. One of the things that people tell me the most that they want more of is motivation and drive. They conceptually understand what they need to do to build the kind of future that they want or to improve their health, but they can't get themselves to do it consistently. They want more motivation and more drive. They feel like being good, I'm putting that in air quotes, is a constant battle. We talk about this in the podcast fairly often because there are so many inroads to dismantling that unhelpful belief system. We talked about one of those inroads just a few weeks ago in episode 248 about cheat days. You can make what's most pleasurable and enjoyable for you and what's best for you gradually become the same thing. And that's magic. And it's easier to do if you naturally have a significant amount of motivation, grit, and perseverance in your personality. And guess what? There's a physical structure inside your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex that largely determines how much tenacity you have in your disposition. And you can deliberately change it if you want to. I'll put a link in the show notes to a 2019 article in the journal Cortex called The Tenacious Brain, How the Anterior Mid-Cingulate Contributes to Achieving Goals. There's a ton of good stuff in the article, but I want to mention two of the areas they specifically talk about where the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, or AMCC, makes a big difference first. Aging outcomes and health outcomes. There are others like academic and professional success, but in their journal article, they say this. Exceptional cases of healthy aging are associated with increased tenacity. Multiple studies have identified a remarkable subgroup of elderly people known as superagers whose performance on some cognitive measures is equivalent to middle-aged and even young adults, despite their advanced age. Many of the neurobiological differences between superagers and typical older adults involve the structure and function of the AMCC. Cortical thickness of AMCC in superagers is equivalent to young controls, exceeding the thickness of middle-aged people. Superagers also have greater intrinsic functional connectivity between AMCC and major nodes of the salience network. Thickness and network connectivity of AMCC can predict successful memory performance in older adults. Okay, so we'll get into what cortical thickness and intrinsic functional connectivity means, but that's one of my favorite paragraphs, so I thought it was a good place to start. If you want to be a so-called superager, which in this case is more about working memory and mental processing speeds, you'll need a high-functioning AMCC. The authors also talk about how a physically large and extensively connected anterior mid-cingulate cortex promotes a natural willingness to engage in effortful physical exercise, the ability to deter food rewards, choosing healthy fuel over calorically dense foods, the cognitive control needed to self-regulate food cravings, and a greater ability to self-regulate appetite. So the anterior mid-cingulate cortex was first described in 1907. It's a spot inside the medial frontal lobe of your brain, kind of toward the top front of your forehead, sort of behind your prefrontal cortex. What makes the AMCC so powerful is that it's an intersection of many important brain networks. So it's like an integrator of brain signals that have to do with body sensations, maintaining stability of body functions, motor planning, and executive function. Because of its physical location and unique connections to so many different brain systems, the AMCC is considered one of the most broadly connected regions of the brain, which makes it imperative for the willed control of our behavior. One of the main things the AMCC does is weigh the cost of effort versus the value of rewards. Because of its special connections to lots of very different brain areas, the AMCC is able to perform complicated computations that we're completely unaware of and determine whether we believe we have the energy resources required to meet the estimated physiological demands of a task required to achieve a goal. The AMCC, somehow below our conscious awareness, encodes the anticipated value of a reward and also the anticipated energy and resource cost to obtain the reward. It's constantly monitoring the internal state of the body and our available resources and capacity for work, and comparing that to the benefits we would get from achieving goals and obtaining rewards. It also prepares our body for taking action to go after the rewards that we seek. One research subject who had his AMCC electronically stimulated said he felt like he was about to drive into a storm, like his whole self was gearing up to rise to the occasion of doing something difficult and unknowable. Wouldn't that be so weird to be overcome with an intense feeling that you kind of recognize just from having an electrode on your head? The AMCC is one of the coolest places in your body because people who persevere in the face of challenging situations show better life outcomes in health, academics, career success, healthy aging, life satisfaction, and more. Angela Duckworth wrote many articles about this starting in 2009, and in 2016 she wrote her book, Grit. She defines grit as passion and perseverance toward especially long-term goals. The AMCC matters here because gritty people tend to skew toward devaluing the cost of effort and highly valuing long-term rewards. A bigger and better connected AMCC gives you a subconscious bias toward devaluing hard work and highly valuing long-term rewards. Buffing up your AMCC makes grittiness your default mode. Pretty great, right? When I was reading the book Ballistic by Henry Abbott, the main character Marcus talked about how someone, I forgot her name, was one of the best athletes and people he knew because she didn't attach any emotional baggage to hard work. Something like that. I thought it was an interesting way to think about it. She was willing to show up and do things like swim in a very cold ocean without attaching any emotions or drama or feeling sorry for herself or anything else to it. And it made her fabulous. And it probably felt better to her, too. It made me think about our ancestors and how complaining about climate or the absence of comfort is kind of a modern indulgence. I'd be willing to bet she had a large and well-connected anterior mid-cingulate cortex. I was recently listening to a money expert of all things talking about how all the self-helpy advice about using a model to trace back your actions to the thought that's causing your result is all well and good, but it's oftentimes too late, even if you do it immediately, because we have to have a felt sense of safety in our bodies in order to move forward in a grounded way. And comes before the articulated thought about our situation. So many times, in order to have the capacity to venture out into difficulty, what we need is a felt sense of safety rather than just a new thought. And I think her name is Kate Northrup, is onto something, and that it probably has a lot to do with the physical size and functional connectivity of your anterior mid-cingulate cortex. When your brain has the ability to analyze situations and match up options for life betterment with the resources you have available and provide you with feelings of motivation and optimized working memory to assist in formulating an intelligent plan, all while not getting sucked into a vortex of feeling like life isn't fair or it shouldn't have to be this hard, you can do some pretty cool stuff. Another cool thing about the anterior mid-cingulate cortex is that it has the ability to compare its predictions about the physiological cost of going after a goal and the actual experience of receiving a reward, so that adjustments can be made in the future. Does this make sense? So after you expend mental or physical resources doing a Sudoku or hopping around on a pogo stick, you unknowingly evaluate whether the price paid was worth the reward, so you'll subconsciously know next time how much effort you're willing to exert to receive a similar reward. It won't be a conscious decision. Your AMCC will just make you feel like you're up to the task or that you're not. Help motivate you or demotivate you. We know this because a study of gambling tasks showed that healthy individuals respond to negative feedback, like losing a bet, with AMCC activation in their brain and subsequent improved bets and reaction times, while people without AMCC activation, who were people with clinical depression and their AMCC didn't turn on, did not improve their behavior, their outcomes, or their reaction times. Pretty interesting, right? So the AMCC constantly makes decisions below our conscious awareness about how capable we are of doing things and whether the effort is worth the potential reward. But it also recalibrates its prediction models for next time. That's pretty huge because it helps us get better at things over time, like the gamblers in the study, but it's also kind of a preset, a set it and forget it threshold of what we feel we're able to do. That's a big deal because you can consciously manipulate it. If you can train yourself to feel less put out by hard work, or you consistently do more hard things, you strengthen your AMCC. If you train yourself to feel more rewarded by achieving your goals, even tiny ones, or more proud of yourself for accomplishing your objective than sorry for yourself for having to work for it, you strengthen your AMCC. And your AMCC pays you back by helping you feel more capable next time and giving you more of a motivational boost next time. Pretty great. So I told you we'd circle back to what cortical thickness and intrinsic functional connectivity mean. I think you probably get the gist, but having a physically larger, like if we cut it out of your brain and weighed it on a scale, AMCC, changes your reality. You'll age better, achieve more at work and at school, and in your health goals and your hobby goals. You'll have more life satisfaction. You'll be someone who other people admire for her work ethic, well-roundedness, and general life success. Same with functional connectivity. The more actual neuron cells you have connecting your anterior mid-cingulate cortex to the other areas of your brain that deal with memory or physical sensations or emotional control or anticipating the future, the better your life will be. In order to grow in size and connectivity, your brain has to have good blood flow, the ability to metabolize glucose well, enough nutrients on hand, enough hormones on hand, especially progesterone and estrogen, and the right amount of neurotransmitters running around. These are all a big deal, but especially having good glucose control. Being sensitive to insulin is tremendously important if you want your brain to work well now and in the future. If you have all the necessary ingredients on hand, the main way to grow and connect and strengthen your AMCC is to do hard things. Not so hard that you want to die afterward, because that will probably reset your preset to make you subconsciously believe you're less capable of big tasks in the future, but hard things that push you beyond what you're currently capable of. Things that are just a little bit scary. Effortful memory retrieval strengthens and grows your anterior mid-cingulate cortex, so doing mentally challenging things that require you to dig deep in your memories and mental connections helps you to grow your AMCC. I would say that they need to be in conjunction with things that you care about, not just so-called brain games, but that's just me. If you deeply care about brain games, then it counts. But, writing a book or a talk or a presentation for work or developing a new musical or carpentry skill or something, there's a little or a lot of frustration that usually comes with those things, and I think that that's part of the growth process. Something else that has been definitively shown to increase the size and function of your anterior mid-cingulate cortex is, you guessed it, exercise. Exercise in general, but especially high-intensity exercise for growth of the AMCC. Exercise is mega good for your whole brain in general, but completing physically challenging activities that push you beyond what you normally can do helps grow and strengthen your AMCC. High-intensity intervals and lifting very heavy things grow your AMCC. Anything physically demanding that requires you to stretch pretty far past your comfort zone is good for your AMCC. A 2006 study by Colcomb et al. Showed that regular exercise reliably increases the volume of the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. So you can increase the size of your AMCC just by doing the one thing that increases your health span, mood, and pretty much everything else that's good for you more than anything else. Another thing that helps grow your AMCC that I think is awesome is temptation resistance. The more often you're able to feel the desire for something that's not good for you and successfully resist it, the bigger your AMCC becomes. And the bigger your AMCC becomes, the more capacity you have to resist temptations in the future. So don't think that the total annihilation of all temptations from your environment is the key to success. I think there's so much value in training your ability to resist things that you want right now, but don't really want for your future. Which isn't to say that you should keep a bunch of junk food in your house, because you shouldn't, but you should be able to pass by it in the world and have it offered to you without being hijacked by it. What little challenges can you think of that are doable but hard enough to prove to yourself that you're bigger than any temptation? Digitally window shopping with the intent to find something you really want to buy and then not buying it, even if it's on sale for only 2 more hours? Putting a brownie on your desk at work and looking at it and smelling it and then throwing it away at the end of the day, or bringing it home for your teenager instead? Turning off the TV right at the introduction of a major cliffhanger? Getting out your pillow and blankie and brand new library book, but then putting on your shoes and going for a walk before luxuriating on the couch? I think this is such a good one to play with and a great way to grow. I think it would be so fun to do a group challenge where we each pick a temptation of the day and resist it on purpose and share our experiences and ideas. If that's something that would interest you, email me at healthcouragecollective@gmail.com and let's do it. We could make the temptations increasingly tempting over the course of the week or month or however long and come out completely impervious by the end. When you grow the size and connectivity and functionality of your anterior mid-cingulate cortex, your life changes. Who you believe you fundamentally are as a person changes. Your personality changes. Studies show that obese adolescents have weaker AMCC activation responses compared to lean teens. People with damage to the AMCC region of their brain have profound motivational changes, including indifference and stupor. Apathy scores correlate with reduced glucose metabolism in the AMCC region. Patients with depression have lower cerebral blood flow to their AMCC. Alzheimer's, frontotemporal dementia, and Parkinson's disease are associated with altered glucose metabolism in the AMCC and also with apathy. Patients with clinical depression who show reduced activation of their AMCC have apathy and the inability to plan for long-term goals. They are literally incapable of determining what a proper amount of effort to make toward a goal is. Obese people who are able to stick to a diet increase the size of their AMCC by reducing temptations. Controlling their diet is better for the physical structure of their anterior mid-cingulate cortex than it is for their waist and their butt. High-level athletes and people who perceive themselves as having overcome difficult challenges have bigger and better connected AMCCs. People with a higher exercise capacity, so they're more physically fit, not sure what the parameters were for making that determination, but they're reported as having a higher exercise capacity, have better functioning, more active AMCCs than those with lower exercise capacity. Studies have shown that greater gray matter volume in the AMCC region of the brain is predictive of persistence in personality, and that situations where the AMCC is more active are associated with times when people prefer to make a greater effort in return for a reward, both physical effort and mental effort. People with active and metabolically healthy AMCCs have lower apathy, more grit, more persistence, increased willingness to exert more effort, and an increased will to persevere through challenges. People with robust anterior mid-cingulate cortexes have a greater ability to deter rewards and are more prone to choose healthy foods over calorically dense alternatives presented to them. And people with a higher AMCC response when they're given food are more able to self-regulate their appetite. When the AMCC is activated, people show more cognitive control that allows them to self-regulate their cravings. An active AMCC is also associated with increased working memory, the ability to do more challenging mental arithmetic, more memory retrieval over longer delays, and more precise visual discrimination. There are very rare cases where the AMCC could be too stimulated, and it appears to be associated with excessive fixation on goals and conditions like anorexia and life-crippling perfectionism. So, it's almost all good, and almost all of us want to beef up our anterior mid-cingulate cortex, but there are a few rare cases when it's not what's needed, which I think is important to be aware of. The study in the journal Cortex had this sentence, which I think is super fascinating. One of the most consistently active areas shown on functional MRIs and also the highest degree of functional diversity and flexibility is the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, end quote. Meaning it varies a lot from person to person, functional diversity, and flexibility, meaning it can vary a lot within the same person. This is so cool because it means you can have conscious control over this subconscious algorithm that determines your motivation and tenacity. You can hack your grit, and it works. Amazing. People with bigger and more connected AMCCs with good blood flow and proper glucose metabolism have a bias in their subconscious computations that skews them toward persistence versus withdrawal from a task. They naturally devalue effort and have high expectation of reward. They view the reward as more important than the cost of action to achieve it. They view their resources as more than adequate for the task required to obtain the reward. The authors of the journal article define the AMCC as the network hub in the brain that fosters the computations needed for tenacity. And their definition of tenacity is the tendency to maintain the representation of expected rewards and to judge one's available physiological resources as meeting or exceeding task demands. They also say that greater AMCC structure and function are linked to tenacious behavior in many domains of life and health, and that the AMCC is well equipped to reshape its connectivity in response to learning, more so than other brain areas. Protein receptors important for plasticity are highly expressed in the AMCC. Training related to improvement in behaviors requiring tenacity may be mediated through the AMCC, end quote. So they're saying you can train your AMCC. It's very changeable. I always say that your physiology affects your psychology, and this is a case where it's not at all abstract. If you beef up this physical spot in your brain, you'll change what you naturally tend to do. You'll become more tenacious and have more motivation to persevere. You do also need to have adequate resources like functional mitochondria on site, but that's a discussion for another day. In addition to staying on top of all of the things that make your overall brain happy, like healthy glucose metabolism, a healthy cardiovascular system to deliver adequate blood flow to your brain, proper nutrients, including omega-3s and enough progesterone and estrogen, doing some things that you don't enjoy, resisting some temptations that you do enjoy, doing mentally hard things to the point of discomfort, doing physically hard things to the point of discomfort, having a regular set of challenges that push you out of your comfort zone, practicing mindfulness, and engaging in discomfort on purpose will all increase the strength and size of your anterior mid-cingulate cortex. So schedule a little more drudgery into your day, or take a cold shower, or get in a sauna, or do a Tabata workout, or bench press something heavy. Agree to sing in the choir, or change your own oil, or research how to use less toilet paper at work, or something. Doing so gives you a physical advantage that biases you toward being motivated to take productive action. Something that's not mentioned anywhere in the AMCC research, but I personally think makes good sense, is something else I talk about all the time. When you do something to move you toward a goal, something that you weren't necessarily thrilled about doing, remember to celebrate, even if it's something tiny. We know from BJ Fogg in Tiny Habits that celebration is huge in building habits. Huge. So never forget that step. And it seems to me that if our goal is to build up our AMCC, which we know is trainable and always does an after-action review of sorts, then we want to be way more excited about our achievements than we are bummed about the work that they required. So in addition to working on becoming neutral about doing hard things, like that athlete who has no emotional baggage about freezing cold swims in shark-infested water, and proving to ourselves that we're capable of doing hard things, let's get really excited about our achievements. Affirm to ourselves that the result was more than worth the energy it required. Then next time our subconscious calculus might tip a tiny bit more in favor of perseverance toward the reward than bowing out. I hope learning about your anterior mid-cingulate cortex was worth your time today. I'm a real human person who writes every word of these podcasts with intention and would never waste your time with AI-generated noise. I just want smart women like you to benefit from implementing small changes that most people don't do to make it so that they can live and give more as they get older rather than less. And your AMCC is a huge part of that. Next week, we're going to talk more about upgrading your brain by treating your brain indigestion. Until then, next time someone asks you why you're doing something the hard way, tell them it's because you're training your anterior mid-cingulate cortex, and maybe they should do the same. And don't be normal. Thank you so much for showing up for yourself today and caring about how powerfully you're able to show up for the world 20 or 30 years from now. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean the world to me if you share it with a friend and also subscribe to future episodes. The more smart women like you we can have in this community together, the more we can lift and strengthen one another. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects caused by the use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.